Hello YouTube, welcome to my first deck profile in the Final Fantasy TCG. So I've been wanting to do deck profiles for a while, and obviously with the card combo show, it's nice to be able to look at some fairly brief and not too deep combos. With a deck profile, you know, you build your whole deck around certain ideas and similar synergies and whatnot, so it means that you're able to go just deeper down the rabbit hole. So this week I'm going to be looking at, and there'll be I say this week, it'll be monthly, but every third Friday, even though I think technically this one's coming out later because life. But anyway, so this week this month I'm going to be looking at a 7 backup breaking deck. So a nice imaginative name there. I'm normally a bit better with it, but here we are. And it's Earth Fire, and this is about 2 weeks after the release of Opus 14 as well. So we've got the likes of Opus 14, Tifa, Cloud and Barrett in the deck. But yeah, the focus of the deck really is to capitalize on backup breaking. Now, not just you breaking your opponent's backups, but breaking your own backups as well. And there's a lot of good cards that do break your own backups, and lots of ways to synergize that. So let's start off. I'm going to go with backups first, then forwards, and then summons and monsters lastly. I'm doing it in kind of like hierarchical order because I think that that's kind of the importance of the deck. Yes, forwards are integral to a deck, and they do generally consist of most of a deck, but trying to play a deck which is only forwards will get you nowhere fast unless it's super aggressive and you can outpace your opponent. So backups are essential. But similarly, you know, you can't win a game with just backups alone. Actually, technically, I mean, it depends if you're able to mill your opponent, but you can't do it with just backups anymore. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Alright, so let's get this show on the road. So, backups. We've got 17 backups, 26 forwards, 5 summons, and 2 monsters. A pretty standard setup, to be honest. I mean, maybe it's a bit light on the ground for summons and monsters. The reason I count summons and monsters as the same thing, effectively, because you pay a cost, they have an effect. Just their monsters are kind of like delayed summons, in a way. Anyway, let's start with Larkicus. So, Larkicus, when he doesn't activate during your active phase, but when he enters the field, you can choose one forward your opponent controls and remove from the game for as long as Larkicus is on the field. So, it does mean that if Larkicus does leave the field, that forward will re-enter. However, if there is a case, say you steal your opponent's Opus 14 Cloud, and then they replay it later, you can then break Larkicus, and that cloud that was removed from him will not re-enter because there was a name clash. It's not legal to do so, so he won't come back in. So it's a nice 1 CP way just to be able to get rid of a really problematic forward, and then if you can break Larkicus, that's good because ultimately he's not going to be activating, which sucks. But he is just a quick and easy way to deal with a problem, and if you can break him and, you know, not suffer the downside of the forward re-entering, then that's fine. Next, you've got Biggs. So when I back up your controls, put from the field into the break zone, deal 1000 damage to all the forward opponent controls. As I mentioned before, it's not just about breaking your opponent's backups, but breaking yours as well. And combining this with the likes of Blaze, where you may be putting him into the break zone, deal 7k to your opponent. Actually, that now becomes 8k to forward opponent controls as well. But it's not just that. Biggs deals 1000 damage to all the forwards your opponent controls. And then we've got Mog Mobius. So, excuse me. Pay 2 Earth and Dull, put Mog Mobius into the break zone, search 1 forward, add it to your hand. So again, combining this with the likes of Biggs and also Opus 14 Garland, obviously Garland's going to be in this deck, it means that you're going to be dealing damage to some of your opponent's forwards, whilst also getting a card to hand from Mog's effect, and if your Garland's on the field, you're also gaining a card to hand as well. But also it's nice because Mog allows you to search for 1 forward and add to your hand. It's any forward, and you can use it on your opponent's turn. So say your opponent's going to try and kill your Garland, you can use Mog to break, or you can break Mog to go search yourself a Garland, use a Garland S. That will also get your card off of Garland's ability as well, so it's a nice way to be able to just find those S when you need to. Princess Goblin. So when Princess Goblin enters the field, you may search for 1 light forward and add to your hand. So the light forward in this deck is Erith, who is super good. But also when a light forward enters your field, put Princess Goblin into the break zone. So that may sound like a downside, but if you're playing Erith onto the field, and you're getting, because Erith's entry ability gets you 2 7 characters other than Erith from the break zone to your hand. So that's, you know, really good. But if then Princess Goblin is dying from this effect, and you've got Garland on the field as well, you're actually getting a 3rd card to your hand as well. So you're playing Erith, maybe bringing it back up, unfortunately, but you're getting 3 cards to hand, which is, you know, pretty good. Next, we've got Geomancer. So this card is just because this card is excellent. It's just such a good card. You can just pay 1 fire and dull, or dull and put Geomancer in the break zone to choose one forward. It gains this forward cannot block until the end of the turn. If you want to break it and you make a forward not be able to block, and then you've got Garland, again you get a card to hand. Biggs as well, deal damage to your forwards. Deal damage to your opponent's forwards, sorry. Jessie. So when Jessie enters the field, you may search for one category 7 forward, add it to your hand. Now I went for this Jessie over the likes of the cost reduction Jessie, because cost reduction Jessie is only on Cloud and Barrett, and whilst they are good, or that is good, the Cloud and Barrett that are running in this, you don't really care so much about getting the cost reduction, and actually being able to find other 7 forwards may be more beneficial. So you've got the likes of Tifa, Vincent, Zach, Red 13, Erith, so that's another great way to be able to do it, to be able to get Erith and then play her to get more cards to hand. Cloud and Barrett, you know, there's lots of good forwards. You don't necessarily want to just be getting the cost reduction on just Cloud and Barrett. Then Minor, so a great way to be able to get those backups back to your hand. So let's say you do break your Larkicus, your opponent's forward can't re-enter for whatever reason, or if it does, it's not problematic to you. But then you can play Minor to get Larkicus back to hand, play Larkicus onto the field, and then remove that forward, or remove another forward again. Super useful, but also just being able to keep them recurring at the backups that you are breaking, and then replaying them if they do have good entry effects, or just having them there if you need to use them. And then obviously Minor does have the break ability, which again, Garland draws you a card, Biggs deals a K damage to your opponent's forwards, but also gets you a forward from the break zone. So this is excellent for, again, S searching. So maybe you want to use an S search for Garland, or you want to use an S search for Vincent. Vincent's very strong S ability. Then we've got Blaze. Just an excellent EX card for fire, to be honest. When he enters, deal 5k to 2 forwards, which doesn't include just your opponent's forward. So if you wanted to maybe put some cards in here that worked in other ways, then you could do so. So maybe you wanted 6 CP forward Shantoto from like Opus 3, I think? I can't remember now. You know, you can deal that damage to Shantoto to then flick around the board as well. And then, again, as I mentioned earlier, you put Blaze into the break zone, deal 7k to a forward opponent controls, but then you also get a card off Garland and a K from Biggs. You see where I'm going with this. And finally, Doga, because Doga isn't essential to this deck, but if you can get Doga down, and you know, it's a sort of card where you look at me like, I'm ahead enough that I can play Doga, and then whenever I want to play a summon of 4 CP or more, it will probably break a backup your opponent controls. Now, if you look at your opponent's backups and they're all 2 CPs, then you're not going to play Doga. But if they're playing some high-costed cards, then maybe it's worth it. You do have to be careful, though, because if you are using Doga to break the backups, you make sure that they're backups that you don't want re-entering as well. But, you know, on the flip side, you will ultimately be getting a card from Doga's ability if you've got Garland on the field, because it's when any backup breaks, you get a card to hand. Alright, next. Scarmelian. So, back attack first strike. When Scarmelian enters the field, choose one forward. During this turn, if it's dealt damage, double the damage instead. So that's a hilarious ability, because obviously you can play Scarmelian, he can then block for effectively 6k when he's first strike, but it doesn't have to be just Scarmelian. It means that you can play Scarmelian onto the field, block with something else, and then what would have been blocking for 6k is now blocking, what would have been blocking for 8k would be blocking for 16k, so, you know, really, really good. But you can also combine that with the likes of something like Blaze, so you can play Scarmelian, then play Blaze, and actually Blaze will deal 10k to one thing and 5k to another, or if you break Blaze's card, then you will also be dealing 14k to something. It's just a great way to be able to synergize with a lot of other cards. Arden. So when Arden enters the field, select one of the 2 following actions. Until the end of the turn, all the forwards you control gain plus 1,000 power first strike. That's really good. Or choose one forward until the end of the turn, it gains plus 3,000 power and brave. So this card alongside 4 CP Phoenix from Opus 3 is just ridiculous. You can have no forwards ready to block. You cast Phoenix. If you've got Doga, you get to break a back up your opponent controls. And then you can bring in Arden. Arden will be standing upright. You can choose to give himself, choose to give your forwards plus 1,000 first strike. He's now an 8k first striker with 2k done to your opponent's board, which means that actually he's blocking for 10k, which, you know, for paying for 4 for Phoenix is amazing. If you're getting the backup break from Doga as well, even better. But not just that, it also works excellently with your other forwards as well. I also really like the choose one forward until the end of the turn it gains plus 3,000 power and brave, because it means that using that alongside the likes of Barrett or Cloud, they can still be substantial blockers on your opponent's turn, but also Barrett has a Minwa effect, so if he's dealt damage less than his power, then he'll be fine. So maybe your opponent has a way of dealing him 10k, you can cheat in Arden to give him plus 3 in Brave, at which point he becomes a 12k and probably won't die or take any damage to it. Next we've got Tifa, another excellent Phoenix target, but when Tifa enters the field you may search for one card named Cloud and add it to your hand. When a forward other than Tifa you control attacks, it gains plus 1000 power until the end of the turn. And then finally at damage 6, when Tifa enters the field you may play one category 7 character from your hand onto the field. So again, if you're at damage 6, an excellent Phoenix target because Tifa can come in, she can block for 7, because the 2k dealt from Phoenix and her own power, but then she can also play a character from your hand. Now let's say you cast Phoenix, you bring in Tifa, who then brings in something like, I don't know, Vincent. You can then use a Vincent S, and then he becomes a massive first strike blocker. Excellent. But not just that, she can also play characters as well, so she could play something like Jessie to go search you another S for something like Vincent, or, you know, just go search you a forward which you need to play onto the field as well. I mean, maybe if you were looking for the haste, you could play Tifa, play Jessie, to then search you a Barrett, who would then give Jessie... actually, technically, I think did she give Jessie Ace? The job Avalanche operative forwards. Oh, never mind. Barrett would actually give Tifa haste as well. And then Vincent. So again, this is a backup breaking deck. So I don't care about his Death Giga's S ability. It's the second one. Damage 5, Chaos S. Vincent gains plus 3000 power, first strike, and when Vincent attacks, choose one character, break it. This effect does not end at the end of the turn. What it also doesn't tell you is that you can stack this effect. So you can Vincent, or you can play Vincent onto the field. You can Chaos. You can then Chaos again. You could then use Minor to get a Vincent back to hand. Chaos again. You know, it's just ridiculous. You can stack it so many times as you want. Obviously, you don't want to do it the turn you play Vincent unless he's got haste, but if you got Vincent ready to attack, and then you can all of a sudden give him 3 abilities, if your opponent can't answer that then and there, they're going to be losing a lot of characters. Now, obviously, you can break characters, so that means you can break your opponent's backups, which with Garland on the field means as many backups as you break, you get that many cards to hand. Excellent. And we got Gipple. So the forwards forming a party you control gain Brave. When a party you control attacks, all forwards of the party gain plus 5000 power until the end of the turn. So this is more just, I like Gipple as a kind of a failsafe. If you've got forwards, there's always times in a game when you're stagnating against your opponent, you're at a bit of an impasse, and they can't do anything, you can't do anything. Having Gipple there means that your forwards become huge and brave, which is a massive problem for them, because ultimately you can start attacking, albeit in a party, and they have to choose, well, I don't want to block it because their forwards are now massive, but they're also brave, so they want to get rid of them. So it's a fantastic way to really present your opponent with a problem. Okay, Zac. So when Zac or a fire forward enters your field, choose a forward, deal at 2k. Same applies for Zac or a category 7 forward. So when Zac enters, you get to do 2 pings of 2. What's good about this is that you can combine this with the likes of Scarmelian. So, you know, you could have Scarmelian or play Scarmelian onto the field, and then Zac enters, he'll then deal 8 hits something, which is fine. But you can also maybe have Scarmelian onto the field, Zac already there, and then play some other 7 forwards, and then same thing. He's just a nice synergy with a lot of the 7 characters, and it's a nice way to be able to deal more ping damage if you need to. It's just a nice bit of consistency. He is on curve, and ultimately I think that it's worth just having that additional kind of damage output there, rather than having to force your opponent to block or having to kill them with summons. You've got the damage there as well. Right, Red 13. If you control a category 7 forward other than Red 13 gains plus 1000 power, haste, and first strike. So I really like the idea of this guy coming down from a Tifa. So you can cast Phoenix to play Tifa to then hopefully play Red 13. Red 13 at that point can then block, and he is a plus 9k first striker, which is excellent. And obviously he comes in with Tifa or from Tifa, and because Tifa's a 7 character, she will then make sure that Red 13 has his own ability. But also Tifa's ability of being able to buff all, or when a forward attacks, it gains plus 1000 power. You know, that combined with Red 13 means he becomes a 10k first striker, which is scary. Next we've got Erith. So when Erith enters the field, choose 2 category 7 characters in your break zone, add them to your hand, which is excellent. And then you've also got Dull, and put Erith into the break zone. Select one of the 2 following actions. Choose one category 7 forward, dull it. It gains this forward cannot be broken until the end of the turn. Sorry, I'm just kind of struggling to read that there. And then choose one dark forward, break it. So it's a nice way just to be able to get rid of something like Neo-X Death or Stern Leonis. But also she can make it so that your forwards become a lot more harder to get rid of. Especially something like Barrett, where, you know, he's got a minimum effect as well, so if they were trying to break it outright, you can use Erith to make it so that he can't be broken as well. But also, just being able to play Erith into the field to get those cards back to hand, again, for S abilities, or just to replay them. Or, if you wanted to, you can use them alongside Cloud or Barrett's Cloud or Barrett's ability, which is discard a 7 forward, or discard a card to get a drop avalanche. You know, there's lots of good ways to be able to use these cards to be able to discard and cycle cards from your break zone. Right, next, Garland. I love this card, and it's a focal point. This card is the reason I built this deck. So anytime a backup is broken, you get to draw a card. So it's your opponent's backups or your backups. It doesn't matter, you get to draw a card. Really good. If Garland is dealt damage by a summoner ability, the damage becomes 0 instead, so he's got like a Cecil ability as well, so he becomes, again, harder to kill. Which means that basically your opponent has to either be able to force him to block, or blank him and deal him damage, which is, you know, a thing. But mostly it's just going to be outright break effects. And then his S ability, which is just flare, S, and dull, that's it. Choose one forward, break it. That's brilliant, but then it's also got, then your opponent selects one backup they control, put it into the break zone. So you get to break a forward and a backup for an S and dull. That's crazy. And you also get a card off it because you're breaking a backup. Now, combining this with something like Gipple means that, you know, if you attack with Garland and, I don't know, Tifa, Garland would actually become a 9k. And no, you wouldn't, he'd become a 9... you get 1 off Tifa, and then you get 3 off of Gipple. So he'd actually become... Is it 3 or is it 5? It's 5, so you gain +6. Jesus Christ, that's huge. So he basically double in power. He becomes a 14k forward, which is, you know, really, really good. But then on the stack, because he's brave, you can then use the Flare S to maybe destroy the blocking forward, or just break a forward and break a backup and get a card to hand. Next, we got Cloud. So if opponent controls any forward, Cloud gains +2000 power. When Cloud attacks, choose one forward, it gains, if possible, this forward must block until the end of the turn, and discard one category 7 card. Until the end of the turn, Cloud gains +1000 power, and Cloud cannot be chosen by opponent's abilities. So this is what I meant earlier by being able to use Erith to then get some 7 cards to hand. If you've got Cloud on the field, you can then have them in hand, ready to be able to give Cloud some protection. What's also good is that, you know, Cloud attacks, he can force a forward to block, but you don't have to make something block, because you can just choose any forward. It means that you can attack with Cloud, and Cloud can choose himself, and then if you didn't want your opponent to block with a particular forward, or you didn't want to force them to block with a particular forward, and you knew that they're going to let the damage through, then you can just let that happen as well. And then, yeah, obviously, if your opponent's got any forward, gains +2k, but if you've got Tifa on the field when he attacks, he also gains a +1000 from that. Again, if you have Gipple on the field and Cloud is part attacking, say with Gipple, he will gain even more power through that. And being brave is decent as well, because, you know, if your opponent does have forwards, he's a good blocker. He's a standard 10k. Right, Barrett. If Barrett is dealt damage less than his power, damage becomes 0 instead, so a minimum effect, as I mentioned earlier. And then the job Avalanche operative forwards other than Barrett you control gain haste, so that's a nice standard ability. Now at the moment, I think the only Avalanche operative forwards other than him are... yeah, it's not him. Yeah, just Tifa. So there's going to be more coming in the 7... I think it's Avalanche versus Shinra dual deck in Opus 15, and there will be more Avalanche operative forwards then, but for now, it's just Tifa that can really gain the haste. But that's fine, because if you're able to use... if you're able to use Tifa to then play Barrett onto the field, Tifa then gains haste from that, and hopefully that can win you the game, or just apply a bit more pressure to your opponent. Then you've got discard one card, discard one card. Choose one job Avalanche operative other than card named Barrett in your break zone, add it to your hand. You can use this ability once per turn. So it's a nice way to be able to just discard a card to get an Avalanche operative ready for Cloud. So you can then give Cloud the added protection if you need to as well, but also being able to just get cards to hand. So, you know, you can discard a card. Maybe you've got Barrett already on the field. You can discard a card to then get your Tifa, to then play Tifa, to search a Cloud, to then play a Cloud, or just to be able to play another forward as well. It's a nice way to just be able to accelerate and really start going ham. And then finally, in the forward, we've got Susano, Lord of the Revel. So he has a 6 CP, aka Haste, but also if a forward damaged by Susano, Lord of the Revel is put from the field into the break zone, on the same turn, removed from the game instead. So this is good because it's not just a case of if it leaves the field from Susano's ability, it's if it leaves this turn after being damaged by Susano. So if you dealt, I don't know, 5k to something with Blaze, and then you dealt it further 9 with Susano, or the other way around, it's still going to be removed from the game. Now you need to be careful because the damage Susano deals is to your forwards as well. When Susano, Lord of the Revel, enters the field, select one backup you control. You may put it into the break zone. When you do so, deal 9,000 damage to all forwards other than Susano, Lord of the Revel. That's an excellent board wipe ability. Obviously, it does hit yours as well, and it will remove yours as well. But realistically, that's no different to then Opus 1 Shantoto. But again, you get to break a backup. You get to break a backup, and you've got Garland on the field. Where are you, Garland? Then you get a card to hand. What's also excellent about this ability is the fact that if Garland is dealt damage by a summoner ability, the damage becomes 0 instead. Doesn't matter if it's a damage ability from either your side or your opponent's, he will take 0 damage. So Susano will actually not deal any damage to Garland. So breaking a backup to deal 9k to your opponent's board with Garland there, you still get to draw a card and Garland stays there. That's amazing. And then obviously Susano has haste as well, so then once you've cleared the board, you can go attacking with Susano, and if you've got Garland there as well, Garland there as well. Right, next we've got the summons. So Phoenix, choose one forward of cost 2 or less in your break zone, play it on the field, deal 2k to all the forwards opponent controls. This card is just excellent since the advent of multicolour cards. Now obviously I don't have a huge amount, there's 7 cards in total, but I've only got 2 Phoenix, so that's fine. And realistically, I think you probably will have a Tifa in your break zone at some point, because you've got something like Chessie to be able to search them, and then you've also got Arden and Scarmelian as well. Arden is a fantastic card to be able to bring back from Phoenix, and Scarmelian isn't the worst either because of the fact that Phoenix will deal 2k to the board, Scarmelian will double the damage dealt to a forward, and Scarmelian can block effectively for 8, which is pretty good. And he's a first striker as well. Not to mention the fact that Phoenix also works with Doga as well, so you can have a massive swing by, if say you've got Garland on the field and you've got Doga in your backup lineup, you cast Phoenix, you get to break a backup of 3 CP or more on your opponent's backup lineup, you get a card through Garland's effect, you then get to bring something onto the field. Let's say you go for Tifa, Tifa can search you a cloud, and then potentially also play you something if you're damage 6 as well. So that's a big shift in your favour to be able to just really aggress your opponent's backups, maybe breaking something as well, I don't know, but then also playing lots of things onto the field. Then you've got Titan, a pretty standard Earth summon to be honest, but just being able to have that protection for your forwards to be able to buff them if you need to, but also aggress your opponent's forwards as well. Works nicely alongside something like Barrett, which has a minimum effect, so if you're able to buff him, but it's a nice way to be able to just keep Barrett alive if you need to. And then you've got Atomos, so EX burst, select one of the 2 following actions, choose one dull forward, break it, choose one forward, deal 8k damage. I tried to include one card that can get rid of Thanos every now and then. Obviously you've got something like Susano, Lord of the Revel, but still, just as many options as you have available to you, it's good to have. And the fact that you have an outright break for any dull forward, break it with Atomos, I think is just excellent. And the fact that it's an EX burst as well is good. And then finally we've got 2 little Mandragora. Now the reason I've got Mandragora here and not something like Hecatoncheir as a summon or the other summons is the fact that Mandragora gains a counter for every Earth character you play, but ultimately you can just play them onto the field and then break a backup of 5 or more, or you can, after 3 counters, put Mandragora and break any backup. Now being able to break some of the smaller backups is actually really, really good, because if your opponent's playing something like Knights and you're able to get rid of their Avalia, so say they have Avalia in the backup lineup, they play Aggress, you can then Mandragora to get rid of Avalia. Avalia isn't there at resolution, at which point Aggress's effects will fizzle. Just loads of great ways to be able to get rid of some of your smaller backups on your opponent's lineup, and generally you find that your opponent, once they play those backups, will happily discard them. Now, with something like, if they start seeing stuff like Doga and Mandragora, they're probably going to hold on to them a bit more. If they are holding on to backups in their hand, that is space that otherwise would be taken up by forwards, so you're still slowing down their ability to aggress you. So having that threat there, I really like. Well, there we go, there's my first deck profile, folks. What do you think? I quite like the concept of backup breaking, and it's a lot easier now, and having something like Garland is just not broken, but he is just incredibly strong. He's got so many upsides and literally no downsides. He is on curve. He has a very, very cheap, very, very powerful S ability. He's got a form of protection, and he gets you cards to hand. it's just fantastic. You could just having Garland in just a mono fire deck without an emphasis on backup breaking. Just anytime anyone breaks a backup, gets your card to hand, as soon as it happens once, it's worth it, you know? And then the new Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa, I think are pretty decent. I really like Cloud. I love the ability to make a forward your opponent controls be able to block. So if it is something super problematic, so they have something like, I don't know, actually, no, Filth Thanos wouldn't work because of the fact they would get cancelled. But yeah, there's lots of problematic forwards that could be there, where you attack with Cloud, force that forward to block, you get rid of it. Anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be lucky, and I'll see you in the next one.